Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Trust you all had a great weekend. It's still wet and raining here in Nairobi, but it's very pleasant for that, except when you're trying to navigate your way to work or home. Of course, we were hosting Hamid, Rashid, the founder and CEO of Finterra, and I did a number of interviews with him. This was an interview to kick off his visit, and then this is very interesting. It's his description of the blockchain, I think well worth watching. My macro thoughts are like this: overheard in the newsroom. Our currency is charts, our Bible is the terminal. Bitcoin dropped as Buffett compared Bitcoin to rat poison at Berkshire Hathaway's annual meeting. 87-year-old investor said Bitcoin would definitely come to a bad ending, and pretty dramatic intervention. And that took the froth off the recent rebound. Look at this, $15 trillion in assets. Read it again and again and let it sink in. This is central bank assets. It's completely distorted the market, in point of fact. Home thoughts, Tim is huge. Perhaps the world's biggest elephant. He roams around a 100-kilometer area, inside and outside the Amboseli National Park. The photograph is by David Yarrow. To be in his company and to be this close is an exhilarating and primeval experience. It certainly is, when you get that close to these enormous creatures. And the thing is, they're like ballet dancers. You don't even hear them move. It's so quiet. The way we heard them is you hear the rustle of branches before you see or hear them. I tweet, but I'm waiting for a fax with my instructions from the deep state. Bourdin, who's a well-known chef, quite witty. I went back to one of my favorite installations from the Hirshhorn, What's in a Name? A name is the first and final marker of individual rights, one fixed part of the ever-changing human world. A name is the most basic characteristic of our human rights. No matter how poor or how rich, all living people have a name, and it is endowed with good wishes, the expectant blessings of kindness and virtue. Will BL took this photograph from a lion at dawn in Kafue in Zambia, and this from I Love Nature, terrifyingly fascinating cloud tsunami sweeps over Sydney. Political reflections also, staying with the weather theme, breaking lava fountains 230 feet high burst from a new fissure of Hawaii's Kilauea volcano overnight, with further eruptions expected. North Korea has warned the US about using pressure and military threats against it as the two countries prepare for a historic summit. A foreign ministry official said the US was deliberately provoking the North by suggesting sanctions will not be lifted until it gives up nuclear weapons. The US is deliberately provoking North Korea at the time when the situation on the Korean peninsula is moving toward peace and reconciliation, thanks to the historic North-South summit at the Panmunjom Declaration, the statement said. This act cannot be construed otherwise than a dangerous attempt to ruin the hard-won atmosphere of dialogue and bring the situation back to square one. It would not be conducive to addressing the issue if the US miscalculates the peace-loving intention of North Korea as a sign of weakness and continues to pursue its pressure and military threats against the latter. As I wrote in April, I said, my question remains, what security guarantees can Trump provide to Kim that convince him to denuclearize? Kim Jong-un can hardly forget what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, both of whom met their ends after being defanged. So my question remains, what security guarantees can Trump envoy to Kim that convince him to denuclearize. Offering up bulletproof security guarantees is the equivalent of threading the needle. Rudy Giuliani was quoted by Haaretz as saying the president is as committed to regime change as we are. Giuliani predicted that Trump will withdraw the United States from the 2015 deal with Iran, with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on his right side and National Security Advisor John Bolton on his left side. What do you think is going to happen to that agreement? Giuliani asked with a grin. Trump must decide by May 12 whether to recertify Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal or to reimpose nuclear-related sanctions. He has stated in recent weeks that the deal is a disaster and should never have been signed. This is a long way away from October 2013, when Barack Obama and Hassan Rouhani, the two Husseins, signed the deal. And I was talking then about the recent rapprochement between President Barack Obama and Iran's Hassan Rouhani has certainly snapped a losing sequence for returning to the mean in US-Iran relations that goes all the way back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. The Shah was the second and last monarch of the House of Pahlavi, and otherwise known as the Peacock Throne. Barack Hussein Obama, and Hassan Rouhani share the same name, as did Prophet Muhammad's revered grandsons. Those who pursue the study of anthroponymy, personal names, especially in the Islamic world, probably viewed this as very fortuitous. I was wandering around the Hirshhorn Gallery in Washington, and I came across this from the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei. What's in a name? A name is the first and final marker of individual rights, one fixed part of the ever-changing human world. A name is the most basic characteristic of our human rights, no matter how poor or how rich. All living people have a name, and it is endowed with good wishes, the expected blessings of kindness and virtue. In 2013, I wrote, Hussein and Hassan are going to have to cut through a great deal of interference. In this situation, there are powerful vested interests, fully invested in the status quo. If the Pax Americana in the Middle East were a three-legged stool with the US the most important leg, then Israel and Saudi Arabia are the other two legs of that stool. So neither Riyadh nor Tel Aviv are aligned with President Obama's Iranian rapprochement, and Saudi Arabia in particular has become increasingly forthright and is even threatening its own pivot away from the US. That was 2013. If you haven't had a chance to look at John Pilger, this is an interview with Going Underground, going beyond the headlines on Syria, Salisbury, Yemen and North Korea. Well worth listening to. Is a dissident voice, but a very valuable one. Profile of Russian President Vladimir Putin and timeline of his years in power. And certainly we've seen a dramatic turnaround. My latest piece about Putin was in April this year, when I was talking about how he was being cornered like a rat in Syria. And in a book in 2000, he talks about the meaning of the word cornered. There on that stair landing, I got a quick and lasting lesson in the meaning of the word cornered. There were hordes of rats in the front entryway. My friends and I used to chase them around with sticks. Once I spotted a huge rat and pursued it down the hall until I drove it into a corner. It had nowhere to run. Suddenly it lashed around and threw itself at me. I was surprised and frightened. Now the rat was chasing me. It jumped across the landing and down the stairs. December 2016, I was writing about the parabolic rebound of Putin. I said then I've no doubt that Putin ran a seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference, which amplified the Trump candidacy. And I said Trump was an ideal candidate for that kind of support. October 2015, after he'd spoken at UNGA and made his Syrian intervention, I spoke of him being a grand master of geopolitics. Now, Stormy Daniels, this actually just happened. The real Stormy Daniels showed up on Saturday Night Live. Have a look at that link. She said, "I know you don't believe in climate change, but the storms are coming, baby," she said. Then they got this wonderful clip. "Yes, hello, this is Dr. Harold Bornstein. Would you like to know any of my patients' medical history?" Michael Avenatti, the lawyer for Stormy, says, "I mean, what we witnessed by Rudy Giuliani may be one of the worst TV appearances by any attorney on behalf of a client in modern times." Lebanon elections, Hariri is expected to retain prime ministership. Hezbollah gains majority in parliament according to the latest poll. International markets, I came across this from Holger. Creative destruction is accelerating. S&P 500 lifespans continue to shrink. The 33-year average tenure of companies on the S&P 500 in 1964 narrowed to 24 years by 2016 and is forecast to shrink to just 12 years by 2027. And then he's linked to a report by InnoSight, well worth looking. Elon Musk tweeted, "I'm starting a candy company and it's going to be amazing." Issy Elliott replied to Elon Musk, "Why haven't you started a cologne brand yet? Elon's Musk." The Glen 777 replying said, "And then an inspirational book titled Elon Musk." Then Bluebird Fun Hat, and then a kennel called Elon's Mutts, and then Skate Jerry Skate, and then a strip joint called Elon's Butts. And then finally Chris tweets, "Damn you, now I need some Tesla Kila." So really a very, I've been following him for a while, to be frank, and I don't know whether his behavior, particularly on social media, has been appropriate or helpful. Currency markets, let's take a look at what's going on there. Euro dollar is last trading at 119.30, dollar index 92.71, Japanese yen 109.25, Swissy 1.005, so back above parity. Pound is at 135.41. The Australian dollar is at 0.7516, India rupee 67.105, South Korean won 1078.41, the Rial 352.87, Egyptian pound 17.6550, the Rand a little bit firmer, 1254.48. Dollar index last trading 92.71, I believe it's going higher still. That long position with the 88 stop has worked out quite well. Euro dollar 119.30. This is a chart from T Commodity. I think it's going lower still, though he doesn't. Iran sanctions could raise oil prices by $10 a barrel, says Barron's. Should Trump reimpose limits, the global market could lose around 1 million barrels of oil a day. Oil futures in New York topped $70. We're now trading at $70.20. This is the first time since November 2014. Saudi Arabia will not stop the rally in oil prices, aiming at a minimum of $80 a barrel. This is via the Wall Street Journal. Gold last trading at $13,1275. Lumber, look at that. This is an esoteric market, but look at that chart. That's from Connor Sen. US farmers already suffering from lost Chinese orders for corn, soybeans, and pork, reports the Wall Street Journal. Nestle and Starbucks looking to bring together the world's most iconic coffee brands, announced an agreement granting the company perpetual rights to market Starbucks' consumer and food service products globally outside of the company's coffee shops. Transaction provides Nestle with a strong platform for continued growth in North America with leadership positions in the premium roast and ground and portioned coffee businesses. This is the CEO of Nestle, Mark Schneider. The transaction is a significant step for our coffee business, Nestle's largest high-growth category. With Starbucks, Nescafe, and Nespresso, we bring together three iconic brands in the world of coffee. We are delighted to have Starbucks as our partner. Both companies have true passion for outstanding coffee and are proud to be recognized as global leaders for their responsible and sustainable coffee sourcing. This is a great day for coffee lovers around the world. As part of this transaction, Starbucks will receive an upfront cash payment of $7.15 billion for a business which generated annual sales of $2 billion. The transaction does not include the transfer of any fixed assets, which facilitates a smooth and efficient integration. Nestle expects this business to contribute positively to its earnings per share and organic growth targets as from 2019. Nestle's ongoing share buyback program will remain unchanged. This is a photograph I took of a Nestle coffee when I last visited their offices in Nairobi. Big deal, actually. Lots of activity in that coffee market. Emerging markets, Argentina's central bank just raised its reference rate to a whopping 40%. JS Blockland. My piece over the weekend, Africa Calling. Of course, Africa is not a country. In fact, the continent is seriously non-linear. Booms and busts quite often occur simultaneously. However, what is clear is that the demographic surge, the overwhelming nature of the numbers of the spawn-free generation, despite beliefs that millennials make up a large proportion of the African population, they are less than 30% of this population according to the 2017 estimates by the African Development Bank. Africans aged between 15 and below make up 40% of the continent's population. Those below 19 years old are 51% of the population. This is according to Geopolitical. And I'm saying that demographic surge is creating a more homogeneous Africa. The arrival of the information century, which started with the mobile phone and the mobile internet, triggered a process of binding Africans closer to their fellow Africans. Once upon a time, when I was a young boy, we had one of the few landlines in Mombasa. That was my connection to the world. Today, I and millions like me know what is happening in real time across this massive continent of ours. What has occurred in the last 2 decades is surely a revolution whose velocity continues to gather speed. And when you look at the graph, which started at practically zero, it's a little dizzying, and I would like to write a book about it at some point. My favorite economist is a gentleman called Joseph Alois Schumpeter, who said, "Creative destruction describes the process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within, incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one." According to a report by InnoSight, hat tip to Holger for that, the 33-year average tenure of companies on the S&P 500 in 1964 narrowed to 24 years by 2016 and is forecast to shrink to just 12 years by 2027. I imagine one of my more jaded and hard-bitten Africa hands muttering, "Look here, Ali Khan, Africa, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose." And I would respond, "Look here, buddy, stop dreaming. The change is here. It's already happened." Take a look at the banks. This is a Darwinian moment, surely. The most important role at this moment is surely that of artificial intelligence. I've yet to see any bank speak to this in any investor briefing meaningfully. Look at the retail sector. Globally, the retail sector has been completely disrupted. I have to believe that retail disruption has already reached our African shores. If you want an example of that retail disruption, just take a look at Kenya. At moments of disruption, there is always a great deal of debris scattered all over the place. My commute is along the Kiambu Road, which was once a quaint little used road into coffee-growing country, but today has morphed into a crazy Mad Max world where buses careering along the wrong side of the road in a red dust cloud is something the commuter has to consider as a relatively regular phenomenon. And as I peer through the dust, one thing I'm sure about is that e-commerce is coming. It's coming bigly, and a lot of these freshly minted malls, some of them just a couple of kilometers from one another, are headed for Ozymandias. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Let me loop now to Safaricom, which will be reporting its full-year earnings on Wednesday morning. I don't need to remind you of Safaricom's centrality to the fortunes of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Safaricom has a market cap of $11.2 billion, about 43% of the total market cap of the Securities Exchange. Therefore, this is the big beast of earnings releases of the Securities Exchange. After hitting a record high on April 5, Safaricom corrected 20% through Friday morning. Citibank was surely the catalyst with a skeptical earnings perspective. Safaricom provided every Kenyan with an entry ticket into the 21st century. Jack Ma last year posed the question when asked about the infrastructure gap. But what is the most important infrastructure of them all? It's the information superhighway, and yours is fast. Safaricom is a need, not a want. By the dip, add to the position if we react lower on the results. Safaricom has built the superhighway. Everyone else is still playing the tarmacking game. You know what I mean. The roads around Westlands are the best example. Safaricom share price data can be seen on rich wrap-ups as well. After 20 years, can Ethiopia and Eritrea ever reconcile? Asked Martin Plough in the New Statesman, talking about the war that erupted between them on the 6th of May 1998 was unlike any of the continent had seen since the Second World War. Then saying that the state of standoff suits Eritrean President Isaiah Afwerki, an absolute ruler who brooks no opposition. The no war, no peace confrontation with Ethiopia has provided the perfect excuse for permanently keeping a lid on Eritrean democracy. There are few incentives for him to make concessions to resolve the situation with Addis Ababa. That's probably more of the problem, actually. Lately, Robert Mugabe seen here using a red carpet in his compound. Engineer Dan tweets, indeed, power corrupts the mind. Dollar squeeze spells more pain for world's worst currency. This is the Angolan Kwanza. Devalued the Kwanza in January and then kept it fairly stable in the following 2 months, but the central bank in Africa's second biggest producer is losing its grip again, dropping the currency 3.7% against the dollar last week and 2.2% this week. It's down 27% year to date. Foreign exchange squeeze remains substantial. It is reflected by the Kwanza's black market rate. Standard Chartered analysts said the Kwanza trades at 420 against the greenback on the streets of the capital, Luanda, almost 45% weaker than its official rate of 230. Remains a problem. Eurasia Group sees Zambia default risk rising as IMF loan talks stall. And I wrote about this in a quote I gave to my friend Ronak when I said this might well be the harbinger in Zambia. South African all shares down 3.12% year to date. Dollar versus rand, we've strengthened a little bit, 12.5448. Nigerian all share up 7.78% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange up 34.82% year to date. Vivo Energy bet on African fuel yields London's biggest IPO of 2018. Vivo Energy's bet on fuel demand growth in Africa has earned it a market value of almost £2 million. London's largest initial public offering this year, backed by the world's biggest independent oil trader Vitol Group and private equity firm Helios Investment Partners. Vivo sells fuels and lubricants across the continent, from Morocco to Mozambique. The company expects demand for its products to grow between 3 and 4% annually. The investor meetings have shown fantastic African interest because of the consumer growth, Chama said. Vivo's market value also makes it the largest listing of an African-focused business since 2005. Established in 2011 by Vitol and Helios, the company operates under the Shell brand at about 1,800 service stations over 15 countries in Africa. It will expand to 24 countries after its purchase of Engen. Vivo posted adjusted net income of $171 million last year, up 57% from 2016. They're going to dilute their stakes a little bit. As much as 30.5% of Vivo's equity is being sold for 165 pence a piece. Guide price is 155 to 180. I think it's a bit of a buy. The Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has arrived in Kenya for a 2-day state visit, and I heard the cannon a little bit earlier. He's really been crisscrossing Ethiopia, crisscrossing his neighbors. Very interesting and enthusiastic entry. Unilever Credit Initiative aims to drive Africa revenues. Francis Mugambo could not be happier. Sales of Unilever products at his Maxon supermarket, a 35 square meter dimly lit shop in the Tasia district of Nairobi, have risen 40% to 21,000 shillings a week since January. He expects them to rise to at least another 50% in the next 3 months. The surge is not the result of a boycott of Unilever competitors or newfound wealth by residents in a neighborhood where few roads are paved and many sewers are open streams. He's joined a project launched by the consumer goods company Unilever to help tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses in Kenya sell its products, from margarine to washing detergent. Most traders not having bank accounts, let alone a formal credit history, Unilever is using big data to unlock their hitherto extremely restricted access to credit and thus expand its own sales. Bruno Wittvoet, the president of Unilever Africa, said the project called Jazaduka, or Fill the Kiosks in Swahili, highlighted the need to look at different models to succeed in sub-Saharan Africa. Informal traders account for just over 50% of retail sales for Unilever in Kenya. Other multinationals, including Procter & Gamble and East African breweries, have started similar but smaller initiatives with 4G Capital, which is a Nairobi-based microfinance institution. Unilever uses its traders' purchasing history to determine whether they qualify for loans and the maximum credit available. Traders are given 17 days to repay the loans interest-free. Partnered with KCB, it's called Jazaduka. Money is loaned to Unilever's distributors, which supply the traders who then repay KCB directly, usually via a mobile money platform. Joshua Ogara of KCB says, so we have to move away from the old model of know your customer. He said, sometimes we don't know them, but the data shows that they can be trusted. It's the ability to analyze the data that we're collecting and linking to the customer's behavior, which is the reason for our success. Mr. Magambo said Jazaduka transformed his business. Cash flow and access to credit are my crises. This has given me both because I don't have to pay cash to increase my stock. He said profits could rise as much as 10% as the additional Unilever stock triggers additional sales of other products. This is the way forward. Thank you. Java House aims to spread its wings under Abraj. Plans to double outlet numbers in the domestic market over the next 2 years before expanding in East Africa and beyond. Plans to open 25 new restaurants in Uganda, a dozen in Rwanda over the next 5 years. Looking at entering Nigeria. It was opened as a single coffee shop in 1999. Has now grown to a 65 outlet chain. And so for us, Java House is not an East African story, it's an international story. I'm pretty certain we'll get there in the next couple of years, said the CEO. Then George Kaburu says, shouldn't Java House now list at the Nairobi Securities Exchange? I said, yes, George, if Abraj Group did that, I reckon they would reap a 2x return on the purchase but I think they're probably looking for a 10x over 5 years. And I'm surprised the NSE is not parked outside Mr. Naqvi's office. Kenjen were a great guest on Mindspeak. We're editing, we're in the edit suite, and we really made a huge impact. It's quite interesting how big an impact it made. Stanbig's adjusted PMI rose to 56.4 in April from 55.7 in March. Look at the bond yield chart. This is the yield curve, again via Cyton. 10 and 30-year dollar-euro bonds spreads increased by 30 basis points for the 10-year and 20 basis points for the 30-year to 7.9%. Let's have it soften a bit more before we step in. On a year-to-date basis, the shilling has gained 2.9% against the dollar. Inflation rate for the month of April declined to 3.7% from 4.2% in March, lowest level since January 2013. This was driven by a slowdown in food inflation to 0.3% from 2.2% in March. The Nairobi all-share snapped a losing streak, which had gone all the way back to April 5, rallied 2.5% on Friday. The all-shares up 4.77% year-to-date, but it's down 8.755% since hitting that record high. The market is currently trading at a P/E ratio of 14.3. And finally, Stanbic Bank, and I missed this, released Q1 2018 results, recording a 79% increase in the profit after tax. It's interesting. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful.